Good day, students. Welcome to mathgotserve.com. In this clip, we're going to be going over how to solve absolute value equations. Before we get started, we're going to do a real quick review on what the absolute value of a number means. Okay? So, the absolute value of, let's say, a number A is basically the distance that number A is from 0 on the number line. Okay, so the distance from 0 to A on the number line. And then something that you have to keep in mind is that the absolute value is always positive, okay, because it's basically you're looking at the size and not the direction. So for example, if you want to find the absolute value of 3, okay, the absolute value of 3 is 3. Well, why is that? The reason why the absolute value of 3 is 3 is because on the number line, the distance from 0 to 3 is basically 3 units. So let's say 1, 2, 3. So the absolute value of 3 is how far is this number from 0 on the number line. So it's 1, 2, 3. It's 3 units. So that's why the absolute value of 3 is 3. What of the absolute value of negative 5? The absolute value of negative 5 is 5 because the distance of 5 from 0, negative 5 from 0 on the number line is 5. Okay, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, one thing you want to note is that absolute value doesn't consider direction. Okay, it just considers size. So, how many units is negative 5 away from 0 on the number line? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's 5 units away, so that is why the absolute value of negative 5 is 5. And then something else to keep in mind is how to get rid of the absolute value using its parentheses equivalent. Okay? So if you're solving an absolute value equation, let's say you have absolute value of x. In order to get rid of the parentheses, the absolute value brackets, you can basically replace the absolute value brackets with parentheses, and you include plus or minus to indicate that you can either go to the left or to the right by that number that this quantity is equal to. Okay? All right, let's go ahead and try out an example. The instructions are: solve the given absolute value equation, solve, graph the result, and check your answer. Okay, and check. So we're going to solve, graph, and check. All right, so let's say we have the following absolute value equation. The absolute value of the quantity x minus 2 equals 3. Okay, so given this absolute value equation, we're going to solve it, and then we'll graph our solution and check the answer. Okay, all right, so let's go ahead and solve this equation. So we have the absolute value of x minus 2 equals 3. Now, first things first, we want to get rid of this absolute value bracket. So the absolute value bracket, remember what we talked about, that the absolute value bracket can be replaced with plus or minus parentheses. Okay, so we're going to apply that procedure here. Replace the absolute value bracket with plus or minus x minus 2 equals 3. Now we want to isolate this this quantity in the parentheses, so we need the absolute value, this plus or minus sign on the right side of the equation. So we know that there is a 1 right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide both sides by plus or minus 1 in order to get rid of that plus or minus sign that's on the left side associated with the quantity x minus 2. So divide both sides by plus or minus 1, or you can multiply both sides by plus or minus 1. And that will result in x minus 2 equals positive 3 divided by plus or minus 1 is just plus or minus 3. Now at this point, this is where we're going to split our equation into two. You might ask yourself, how is that possible? Well, plus or minus represents two possible signs for 3. So it's either positive 3 or negative 3. Okay? So let's go ahead and carry out our split. So we're going to put the negative part on to the left, and then the positive part we're going to put to the right. Okay? Alright, so what do I mean by positive and negative parts? So for the negative part, we're just going to take this entire equation but replace plus or minus 3 with negative 3. So we're going to have x minus 2 is equal to negative 3. That's for the negative part. Okay? And then for the positive part, what we're going to do is we're going to replace this equation. We'll write the equation, but we'll have x minus 2 equals positive 3. So solving these two equations will give us our answers. Okay? Alright, let's go ahead and solve the first one. This one can be solved in one step. You just simply add 2 to both sides of the equation, and that yields x equals so this adds up to 0, right? So we have x equals negative 3 plus 2, subtract and keep the sign of the bigger, negative 1. That's the first answer. Now for the second equation, what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of this 2, follow the same procedure using the inverse operation, which is plus 2. So you add 2 to both sides of the equation, and then we're going to have those 2 minus 2 plus 2 add up to 0, and we're left with x equals 3 plus 2, which is 5. Those are the two answers for our absolute value equation. So let's go ahead and write down our solutions. Our solutions are going to be x equals negative 1 or x equals 5. Okay, let's go ahead and graph the solution. We have successfully solved it. So now the next part is the graphing part. So let's graph. So we just have two numbers on the number line. Okay, that's the solution to the absolute value equation. So all we're going to do is graph negative 1 and 5. So if this is 0, can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and negative 1. Alright, so first answer is negative 1, and then second answer is 5. So those are the two solutions to our absolute value equation. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and check our answers to see if they are correct. Okay, so we have the graph. Now the last part is the check. We have two solutions, so we're going to be carrying out two checks. Okay. Alright, so the first check, let's use the smaller one, x equals negative 1. So that's what we're going to be checking to see if that x value satisfies the absolute value equation. Okay, so we have the original equation, the absolute value of x minus 2 is equal to 3. So this is a proof. We're going to be generating our t-chart to carry out our check. So what are we going to do with the negative 1? We're going to simply plug it into the x position of the problem and see if we end up with a true statement. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. If we carry out the substitution, we'll have the absolute value of negative 1 minus 2. And we'll ask ourselves, is this expression equal to 3? Is it? Well, let's simplify. On the left side, we'll simplify what's inside the absolute value brackets, following the order of operations. Minus 1 minus 2 is minus 3. Add and keep the sign. Is the absolute value of 3 equal to 3? Now, what is the absolute value of 3? The absolute value of 3 is 3. Why is that? The absolute value of 3 is 3 because negative 3 is 3 units away from 0 on the number line. Okay? Is 3 equal 3? It certainly is, so this check is true. So since this check is true, does that automatically mean that our answers are correct? The answer is no. We have two answers, so we have to carry out two checks. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to repeat the same procedure, but in this case we're going to be using negative 5 for our x value. Okay, so x minus 2 equals 3 is the original problem. We're going to make another t-chart for our second absolute value equation check. Alright, so what are we going to do with the 5? We're going to plug it into the 2 position. Let's go ahead and simplify that. We're going to have the absolute value of 5 minus 2. Is this equal to 3? Is it? 5 minus 2 is 3. Is the absolute value of 3 equal to 3? Now, what is the absolute value of 3? Now, some people will say, oh, the absolute value is simply the opposite. But the absolute value is not the opposite. It is the distance of a number from 0. How many units away from 0 is the number? So how many units is 3 from 0 on the number line? It's going to be 3. Remember, absolute value of a number can never be negative because distance is always positive. Okay, so we have 3. Is 3 equal to 3? Yes, that's true. Since both statements, both checks come out true, what does that mean? It means that our answer, x equals negative 1 or 5, is in fact correct. So this is good. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch this presentation. I really appreciate it. If you found the contents of this tutorial helpful in your studies of equations, do give us a thumbs up. Your positive feedback is very valuable to us. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for updates to the remainder of this review series. More tools, tutorials, and support resources can be found at our website, math.serve.com. And if you have any questions or comments, just place it in the comment section below, and we'll be more than glad to assist you. Thanks again for watching and have a wonderful day. Goodbye.